Hi there, and welcome to this video on GCSE Biology for the AQA Specification, focusing on the topic of hormonal coordination in humans, and in particular on maintaining water and nitrogen balance in the body. I'm Shumina from StudyMind, where we help you revise GCSE Biology with our helpful video tutorials, tailored to your subject, your specification, and to you. If you're new here, make sure you click the subscribe button. Whilst you are watching, please leave any comments below if you're unsure about anything, and let us know if it's your first time watching our videos so we can send you our free revision materials. We also have helpful timestamps below for each part of the video to help guide you through the specification. So let's get started. Hello, and welcome to this tutorial on hormonal coordination in humans. And today we're going to be having a look at maintaining nitrogen and water balance in the body. So in our last tutorial we had a look at the control of blood glucose concentration and how this can go wrong in the context of disease. So when we have a breakdown of glucose homeostasis we get diabetes. And in a similar way we're going to have a look at what happens when we get a breakdown of osmoregulation in the body in this tutorial. So first off we'll start off at looking at osmoregulation. Then we'll have a look at how exactly we excrete water and nutrients from our blood. And since this all involves the kidneys, we're then going to have a look at this in the context of disease, so in the context of kidney failure and how we can then treat this. So first of all, let's have a look at osmoregulation. So the key things that you've got to remember here is that there's a semi-permeable membrane in this test tube which allows movement of water molecules between the two sides of the tube. So osmoregulation is defined as the control of blood water and mineral levels, so the regulation of osmotic potential. So water and nitrogen levels must be maintained in the body. And osmosis is defined as the movement of water down a gradient. And when water or salt levels change in the blood, there can be an osmotic effect. So this means that osmosis occurs and there is a movement of water down its gradient. So let's take a look at osmoregulation in plant cells. So in a normal plant cell, we're going to have equal movement of water out and into the cell, and we're going to have good homeostasis in this plant cell. But in a plant cell that's full of water, there's more water moving into the cell, across the cell membrane and cell wall, and that's going to make the plant cell full of water, and we refer to this plant cell as turgid because it's almost at bursting point. And water is stored in the vacuole in the plant cell, which remember we don't have in animal cells. In contrast, when there's more water movement out of the plant cell is going to shrink and it's going to be flaccid. So you can see that the cell membrane is pulling away from the cell wall here because your vacuole is less full with water because you're getting water movement out of the plant cell. So plant cells can be turgid when full of water, and this is really useful in the context of guard cells, which take up water, they become turgid, and this opens up the stoma of the plant and enables water loss via transpiration. And in contrast, plant cells can be flaccid when empty of water, and this causes the cytoplasm to move away from the walls, as I just showed you in the previous diagram. So now let's have a look at osmoregulation in human cells. So let's have a look at the red blood cell, for example. So we refer to an isotonic solution. So this is where the water potential on the outside and the ion potential on the outside of the red blood cell is equal to the ion and water concentration on the inside of the red blood cell. So therefore we're going to have a dynamic equilibrium of water movement into and out of the red blood cell, and it's going to be nice and healthy and perfect. Now in a hypertonic solution, we're going to have a higher concentration of ions on the outside of the cell, so in the solution. And so hyper means too high, right? And tonic refers to ions. So this literally translates into too high ion concentration in the solution. So these words up here always refer to the concentration level of the solution. So hypertonic, too many ions in solution. What does that mean? It means there's a lower water potential or lower water concentration outside of the cell. So water is going to move down its concentration gradient via osmosis from the inside of the cell where its concentration is higher to the outside of the cell where its concentration is lower. So we're going to get this shrinking of our red blood cells. They don't look very good here, do they? And similarly, we're going to have the opposite of this in a hypotonic solution. So in a hypotonic solution, hypo means too low, and again, tonic means ions. So too low ion concentration outside of the red blood cell, and therefore we're going to have a higher water concentration outside of the red blood cell because there's fewer ions out there. So we're going to get movement of water from its high concentration to its low concentration. Oops, you can't see that. To its low concentration in the cell. So there's going to be an osmotic movement of water into the red blood cell. It's going to swell and it might even burst, as we can see here. So this just summarises it for you. So in a hypertonic solution, your red blood cells are going to shrink, or the posh word for that is crenate, and there's going to be net movement of water from the cytoplasm of the red blood cell into the blood. And in contrast, in a hypotonic solution, the red blood cells undergo hemolysis, so they burst. So lysis is bursting, and there's net movement of water from the blood into the blood cells that causes this. Now, how can we excrete water from our body? Well, we do this via three main ways. So via the lungs during exhalation, we also lose water in sweat, and also in urine. So this just summarises it for you. So we can't really control how much water we lose via the lungs, because when we breathe out, water and carbon dioxide, so water vapour and carbon dioxide, leave our lungs. We can't control this so much. Same with sweat. So water and ions are lost via sweat, even when water levels are low. So if you exercise, you're going to sweat, whether or not your water levels are high or low in your body, and it's quite difficult to control this too. And with urine, this is the main source of water excretion. You can't really control this too much, but I guess you can control it to an extent because urinating is a voluntary action. Now let's have a look at so we've had a look at the excretion of water, let's have a look at the excretion of proteins. So proteins contain nitrogen, and when proteins are digested, they break down into amino acids by protease enzymes. And excess amino acids cannot be stored, and the liver actually deaminates the amino acids. So deamination is basically the process of removing the amine group from the amino acids. So this means that the nitrogen and hydrogen atoms of the amino acids are lost. So that's the deamination process. And because the liver is deaminating the amino acids, this is going to form ammonia, which is a toxic compound. And ammonia is converted into urea because urea is a safer compound that's safe for excretion. We can't excrete ammonia because it's toxic to us. And it's this urea that is then excreted. So just remember these last few steps here. So now let's have a look at the function of kidneys in maintaining the water balance. So the kidneys control the ion levels by determining the amount of ions we excrete in the urine. So for example, sodium is excreted in the urine. The kidneys also have a role in excreting urea, and remember urea is the breakdown product of proteins that we were talking about just a few slides ago. And the kidneys also control how much water is lost in the urine. So overall, we have three functions of the kidney here. So excretion of ions in order to control the ion levels in the blood, excretion of urea, a byproduct of protein breakdown, and water control, so water homeostasis. And this all occurs by a really complex network of these structures called nephrons in the kidney. And so there are millions of nephrons in the kidney, and they form structures such as this. And how it happens is you have blood arriving to your nephron through the renal capillaries. And blood enters the renal capillaries at a high pressure because it's travelling through this really small capillary, so it's going to be at high pressure. And this high pressure means that the blood can be filtered by the glomerulus of the nephron. So this is our glomerulus here. So we have our blood coming in through our renal capillaries. It's high pressure, so it's going to move into the nephron. And remember, in your blood you have your urea, your proteins, your ions, and your water. So in it goes into the renal capillaries, filtered by the glomerulus of the nephron. And it's water, urea, ions that are filtered into the nephron. But proteins are too big to pass into the nephron, so they pass from the renal capillary into the renal vein. So now we've got rid of the proteins, we're just going to concentrate on the water, urea and ions that were filtered into the nephron at the glomerulus. And this filtered fluid moves through the nephron, which means that after filtration, the fluid only contains glucose, urea, water and ions, because remember the proteins have passed into the renal veins. Now, as this filtrate continues its journey through the nephron, we're going to start to get some reabsorption, because this nephron is eventually going to lead to formation of urine. But we don't necessarily want to lose all of this water, all of this urea, all of this ion, and all of this glucose. In fact, we don't lose glucose. I didn't mean that. We do lose glucose, but we want to regulate the glucose that we lose. So this means that we're going to have some reabsorption going on from your nephron back into your blood in your renal veins. So some water and ions are reabsorbed. And this occurs at this structure here, this loop of Henle. And we're going to get water and ions that are reabsorbed, and this occurs through diffusion, osmosis and active transport, our three methods of movement of particles in the human body. So therefore it's selective. So if we are dehydrated, the loop of Henle and the collecting duct of the nephron, the collecting duct is here, are going to reabsorb lots of water because we are dehydrated and we want to retain water in our body. We don't want to excrete it in urine, we want to retain it in our blood. So this is a selective reabsorption. And remember that no urea is reabsorbed because this is an excretion product, we want to excrete it in the urine. And finally, we're going to have this last stage after reabsorption, which is the excretion. So urine contains water, urea and ions, and renal veins take away proteins, water and reabsorbed ions. And so essentially whatever is not reabsorbed is sent from here. This is the loop of Henle. It's going to go into the collecting duct and out as urine. And urine moves from the kidneys to the bladder through the ureters, and then from the bladder to the rest. Urine then moves from the bladder to the rest of the urinary system. So that's how urine is produced, and that was a little bit complicated, so do go back and watch that again if you're still not quite sure what's happening. But we're now going to have a look at some numbers regarding this. So these are the substances that can be lost in urine. So water is always more concentrated in the urine than in the plasma. Ions are usually more concentrated in the urine than the plasma. Because remember, we're controlling our ion levels in our body, and ions are going to be produced by the various processes going on in our body. So we're going to want to excrete them to maintain ion homeostasis. Glucose shouldn't be present in the urine
at all, as I said earlier. And urea should have a higher concentration in the urine than the plasma. So we can see a higher concentration in the urine than in the plasma. And just like glucose, proteins should also not be excreted in the urine. So don't get this muddled up. So students often say that protein concentrations are very low in the urine and glucose concentrations are very low in the urine. They are not. They are normally zero. They're not very low. And if they are present, there's usually some kind of disease pathology. And also watch out with the terms concentration and amount. So the concentration of something may be lower in the urine, but the amount of something may be higher in the urine. So make sure you understand what these two words mean. So now let's have a look at how else we can maintain water regulation in our blood. So we have this hormone called antidiuretic hormone. So diuresis is the production of urine, okay? So if we're getting antidiuretic hormone, that's going to decrease diuresis because it's antidiuresis, so we're going to get lower production of urine. That's how I work it out in my head. So ADH is released by the pituitary gland and it then travels in the bloodstream to its target organ, which is the kidneys. So ADH is a hormone, so that's why it's using the blood as its transport system. And ADH is a key factor in deciding water content of the blood. So if we're overly hydrated, we urinate frequently, and if we're dehydrated, we urinate less. And water levels are detected in the brain, in the hypothalamus. And this controls how much ADH is released by the pituitary gland. So let's have a look at how this might work. So we want to maintain a normal water content of our blood. But let's say one day you eat lots of crisps or something, so you get a heavy intake of salt. Or maybe you've been out exercising, so you've had increased sweating. So you're going to have a low water content in your blood. Your brain is going to sense this. Your pituitary gland is going to release more ADH, more antidiuretic hormone. Therefore, we're going to so we've got this increased antidiuretic hormone. So therefore, more water is going to be reabsorbed by the kidney because we're going to want to promote antidiuresis. We're going to want to have less diuresis, less urine production. So more water is reabsorbed by the kidney back into the bloodstream, which means a smaller volume of concentrated urine goes to the bladder, and more water is back into the blood of the person. And therefore, that's going to increase your water content because it was low in the blood earlier. We're going to get more water now in the blood because less is being lost in urine, and it's going to increase it back to normal. So this is our classic homeostasis pathway. Too high, something is excreted, and now we get, too low, something's excreted, and now we get movement of the level back to normal levels. And so before we look at this in the opposite direction, perhaps try to think it through yourself. But we'll talk it through now. So let's say you have a heavy intake of water. Your water content in your blood is higher. Your brain is going to sense this, so your pituitary gland is going to release less ADH. So less water is reabsorbed by the kidney. More water forms urine, which means less water is being retained in the blood. Therefore, we're going to get our high water content in our blood being restored back to normal because we're getting more water loss via the kidneys in the urine. So, this summarises it in words. So perhaps annotate this back onto the diagram we were just looking at on the last slide. And as I said, a person might be dehydrated due to eating too much salt or not taking in enough water, or losing lots of water, so for example sweating during exercise, or perhaps being in a warm country. And this is it in the other direction, so overhydration, not dehydration. And again, I'd suggest you annotate this back onto that diagrammatic slide we were looking at. And do remember which way round ADH works. So I told you just now my way of remembering. So I know diuresis means urine production. So if we're getting ADH released, we're promoting antidiuresis, so we're promoting less urine production. And remember that osmoregulation is an example of negative feedback system. So the body works to counter whatever change and return the water levels back to normal. And negative feedback, as we've seen before, is a really, really common theme in homeostasis. And ADH levels are altered in various states. So, for example, alcohol reduces ADH production. And so you're going to get less promotion of antidiuresis, so more diuresis. And urea is normally constant in urine during changes in water content because protein breakdown is going to happen in the body no matter what. And so we normally get a constant amount of urea in the urine. So what happens when our kidney fails? We've seen that it does all these important things, so we're going to have to do something about kidney failure. Well, because the kidneys are so important in filtering out all these toxins in your blood, kidney failure is going to lead to a build-up of toxins, which is going to make the person poorly. So humans may need treatment for this kidney failure. And we do this via dialysis. And dialysis is a process that uses a dialyzer, as you can see here, which basically acts as an artificial kidney, and it filters the blood for us instead of our kidneys doing it, because our kidneys are not working in this case. So how does it work? Well, unfiltered blood is taken from the human. The blood is passed through the dialysis machine, and waste products pass from the blood to the dialysis fluid. And a countercurrent system is used. So this might all seem like gobbledygook to you right now, but we're going to work through it slowly. So this is our blood in our patient. It's being passed through a system of tubes in this dialysis machine. And this is the fluid in our dialysis machine. And we're going to have blood moving one way and dialysis fluid moving the other way. And this is what I mean by a countercurrent system. They're moving in opposite directions, in counter directions. And this maintains a diffusion gradient, basically, because we need a diffusion gradient in order for urea, salt and water to move out of the blood in order to maintain an optimum concentration of these in our blood. But the membrane is special in the sense that it's not going to allow proteins to move across, because remember, we don't want to lose proteins in our blood. So diffusion occurs via filtering, basically in the same way that occurs in the nephrons in the kidney. And as I said, the countercurrent maintains the diffusion gradient. Oopsie, we missed a slide. So this just summarises it for you all on one slide. So it's really important that you remember that a countercurrent system in the dialysis machine maintains the gradient. Now, of course, there are drawbacks to this procedure, so it's a painful process. It requires you to go into the hospital many times, and this will impact the quality of life of the patient and their family. And also, you have to regulate your diet, because the dialysis machine can only do so much, and so you don't want to overstress the dialysis machine, so there has to be a controlled intake of amino acids, so protein, and salts. So now let's have a look at an exam question. So, Koshi has run around his university and comes home feeling very tired. He eats a sugary jam donut as soon as he gets home, but feels hot and dehydrated. Which of the following statements describe processes that are likely to be happening in Koshi's body? So, constriction of hair erector muscles, increased reabsorption of water by the kidney, increased release of ADH by the hypothalamus, secretion of sweat, and increased blood insulin levels. Well, pause the video here and just write true or false next to each of these statements, and then we're going to look through it together. So let's have a look at some answers. So if I put them up here for you, go through and mark what you've done. And now let's just go through together and see why the answer to each question is as it is. So constriction of hair erector muscles is false because Koshi is hot, okay? He's just been for a run. And remember, when you exercise, you're going to want to promote heat loss. And if you have constriction of hair erector muscles, your hair is going to trap air close to your skin, and it's going to insulate you basically. It's going to reduce your heat loss. So this is false because Koshi is hot. He wants to increase his heat loss, so his hair erector muscles are going to be relaxed so that his hair lies down flat and he can get heat loss from the surface of his skin. So that's how you should think these questions through. Think about what the person needs to do to allow homeostasis in his body. Now, number 2, increased reabsorption of water by the kidney. True, 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 because it says in the question Koshi is dehydrated, so we're going to increase reabsorption of water by the kidney into the blood. We don't want to lose water in the urine. Increased release of ADH by the hypothalamus. Now, you might think this is true, but it's a trick question because it was the pituitary gland, not the hypothalamus, that secretes ADH. Okay, so trick question there. Secretion of sweat is true because sweat is going to increase heat loss from the surface of the skin. And increased blood insulin levels is also true because Koshi...
Thanks for watching this free video from StudyMind. If you liked this video, make sure to subscribe to catch our newest videos by clicking below, and leave a comment on a topic you'd like a video on. Click here to watch more videos in our series for GCSE Biology, or visit our website studymind.co.uk for free past paper compilations by topic and specification.